DLSS so I could run it at the native 1440p. That last run actually was 1440p, but now we don't have DLSS on. So there's a little bit of an FPS hit, but as you can see, not too much has changed. So yeah, FPS has definitely suffered a little bit. We're at just about 50% of our VRAM usage here. Yeah, not even 50% of our VRAM usage. So if there's anything that I wanted you guys to kind of learn or take away from this video, it's just the fact that VRAM count is only one portion of what makes a good graphics card a good graphics card. Now, there's no doubt the 3060 is a very fast graphics card. It's the fastest 60 series card we've ever seen. It's got more CUDA cores, it's got more RT cores, more tensor cores, it's got DLSS, it's got ray tracing capabilities. You can see 1440p in a game like Control. If you couldn't see the FPS, I could tell you it was running at least 60 FPS. And we're not even using half of our frame buffer, at least in the titles that we showed here. Now, new games like Watch Dogs Legion, or Watch Dogs Legions, we're seeing reports of it being like more like 8 gigabytes, closer to 8 gigabytes of VRAM. Wolfenstein Youngblood can see as much as like 8 or 9 gigabytes of VRAM, which shows the obvious reason as to at least why brands like AMD and NVIDIA are using more than 8 gigabytes on their newer cards, given as titles become more demanding, resolutions get pushed higher. Maybe that's another thing to keep in mind. People are running higher resolution panels now, more people than ever are running 1440p. It's quickly catching up and going to surpass 1080p in the next couple of years in terms of the dominant panel resolution. But don't get caught up in just that number. I've seen people say, well, this card's better because it has 16 gigs of VRAM. But again, if it's 16 gigs of VRAM and it's slow RAM, then you're obviously going to have a problem there as well. There's just more to it. The amount of VRAM, what is the bus width, what is the speed of the RAM, and then can the core utilize that RAM? It's easy to get caught up in some of these numbers and not understanding the way that they all work together as a system. And I think what we've shown right here is that 8 gigabytes of VRAM is truly the sweet spot. But one of the things you can keep in mind with the amount of RAM that's on graphics cards today is it's about future compatibility. Because if you are running a 4 or 5 year old graphics card like a 10 series, 1060, even a 6G, you can see some of these titles would start really leveraging that. Even though the fact that the core itself wouldn't be strong enough to necessarily run these titles in 1440p to where you would even be able to utilize that level of frame buffer, the core speed itself would definitely feel more dated than the VRAM. But having a fast core like you have on these new graphics cards, giving you higher frame buffer available, will make you that much more relevant farther into the future, so you can play newer titles as the card starts to age before feeling like you have to upgrade your video card. So this video has proved or served any sort of purpose. It's hopefully showing you that there's more to VRAM than just the amount of it. But we have a question for you guys. What are some titles that you have seen that are just extremely dependent on the amount of VRAM in your graphics card? Not system RAM, but VRAM heavy. So sound off in the comments below what some of those titles are, the resolutions and the settings and stuff. That way we can try and recreate some of those scenarios where we can do some future testing ourselves. And if you have any other questions about your system, whether it be system RAM, CPU, or GPU, or you'd like us to do more videos like this where we kind of go in depth a little more, showing you guys the way certain things work, we would like you guys to sound off with the way you think and the topics that you think we should cover. So as always, everyone, thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one. No one likes you anymore, 3G card.
Угощайтесь скидками. Выбор на любой вкус. Сегодня конструктор Лего всего за 2357 рублей. И телевизор Samsung всего за 19350 рублей.
Ну на, например, ну да. Я что, ебну. Да.
Яндекс, самая большая компания на рынке СНГ, придумала, как умножить капитал жителей России. Проект Яндекс Капитал уже приносит своим клиентам от 75 тысяч рублей в день. А оборот компании ежедневно
Злох меня держишь, да?
50
Нет.
миллионов долларов.
Нет.
Алгоритм Яндекс подключает ваш аккаунт к нейросети.
Hey everyone, Tony Winston here. Following up on a couple of videos that I did that were pretty, good videos for me. They paid the bills for a month or two. It was about the diminished scale, the altered scale, and the Lydian dominant scale. And I'm going to show you some of the similarities of these scales. It's just kind of another way to think about them. So if you're using these scales to improve your improvisation, you can't learn to improvise just, by learning these scales and trying to stick them in places. You've got to learn to improvise first, just using melodies out of your own head. The major scale, the blues scale, just picking out melodies to songs by ear, is really the first step in learning to improvise. But for those of you that are looking for ways to improve your improvisation, these three scales are critical. So, useful. So we're going to take the song Green Dolphin Street, and we're going to focus on the 2-5-1s. And so first I'm going to start off just, doing C major, and then C minor, it'd be like Dorian, which is a major scale. It's like the B flat major scale. So, so far, I'm not using any complicated theory. I'm playing C major. And you can put passing tones.
Лайк, суразил.
Then we get to D. We're going to use Lydian dominant. We'll talk about it later. And then the Lydian for those two chords. And then we get to our first 2-5-1. And we got D minor, G7, and the melody goes right there. I'm on G7, and I started on G, and then I went a half step to what would be the flat 9 of the chord and the sharp 9 of the chord. And so that's how the melody of the song goes. So if you're improvising, you can certainly use that idea. And let's see what scales that might suggest. Alright, so all I did was use those two black notes.
Наоборот, тут, да. Вот это есть на самом деле, да.
What scale starts
Да.
like that? There are two
Попробуй теперь, да,
that I know of, that I can think of offhand. One is the diminished scale, starts like that. Also, the altered scale starts with the same 5 notes. Alright, so diminished finishes up with those 4 notes. And the altered scale uses different notes. Oh well, one different note. That instead of both of those. So the diminished scale has got 8 notes, so there's one extra note in there compared to most scales. So that's altered, and this is diminished. So, if you're messing around in this area, you don't have to think about which scale it is. So you can think about the flat 9, the sharp 9, the third, and the tritone, or you can call it the blue note because it's part of the blues scale. So, all right, I used those, so I was in diminished. That was altered. Let me see if I can make a better line than that. And you can start the altered or diminished scale a little ahead of time, even on the D. It won't sound like it exactly fits, but that's okay. It can rub a little bit.
Рабов.
Alright, so that was diminished.
В чем его проблема-то? Наоборот. Да наоборот. Да. Озабоченный ты.
Yeah, so there.
Представь, говорил,
I
как
did use
бы.
an altered voicing as well, so.
Да, понял. Наоборот, ты понял.
Lots of ways to resolve that.
Yeah.
Now let's take a look at Lydian dominant. Lydian dominant starts with the major scale. It's got the sharp 4 in there, and then it ends just like the diminished scale. So this is like the diminished scale. Lydian dominant starts this way. Diminished starts this way, but ends with the same notes like that. So here we go. You know, was I using diminished? Well, up here I was, but down here, you know, it's Lydian dominant, and so if I combine this part of the altered scale and this part of the Lydian dominant scale, I get the diminished scale. So they're very, very closely related, and you can weave in and out of all of them. Maybe just be aware of all the notes you can use.
То есть
I
я
don't think
go
the C was in any of them.
тестиссимо. То есть ямо.
And the F sharp wasn't in any, so all those notes are kind of available to make a melody out of, and not only that, the F sharp works as a passing tone, and you know, the C is obviously not a terrible note either since it's in the G major scale. So anyway, I just thought that was a kind of an interesting way to look at the two scales, or the three scales, and how they kind of relate to each other. On the next 2/5, I'm thinking E flat, because you know, if you're on the 2 chord of a 2/5-1, you know, you use the scale from the 1, the E flat scale, and it gives you Dorian mode. That's just a minor scale, basically. All right, and now on B flat. Did you notice I'm using the same diminished scale here? Because there's only 3 diminished scales. There's 12 Lydian dominants and 12 altered. There's only 3 diminished scales because of the symmetry involved. So that same scale will work for G7, E7, D flat 7, and B flat 7. So it's the same scale. Now, could I use the altered scale the same way?
Да.
That's kind of the
Это
wrong
так.
scale. I would have to, you know,
Наверное,
B
так.
flat,
Где-то так.
and
Пустая голова. Пустой головы просто,
flat
да.
9, my sharp 9, my third, and then finish out with whole steps like that.
Да, вот она и говорит. Это верно. Да, да, да. Что прикажете, да, что прикажете.
Do a better one.
А, ну да.
All right. And what about Lydian dominant?
Ну вот нет, наоборот. Вот наоборот, да.
Well, I've got this. See, that's part of the Lydian
Да,
dominant.
да.
And you recognize it as being part of the diminished scale. The difference is I come up this way
Кстати.
instead of that way, which is the diminished scale. The best lines still come from the blues, in my opinion.
Каменный. 3. Стан.
The blues, and even here. See, you can make that. See, that gets the note for the D. That gets it for the D flat. Maybe use the more major sounding blues scale. This one. All right.
Фигарта, фигарта. Да ты чё, блин?
One other scale that you know I tend not to use as much as my idol, Art Tatum. Don't laugh, I know I play nothing like Art Tatum, but he's the only guy I've been listening to lately for the past week or so.
Elaborate.
I've listened to Art Tatum when I go to sleep, when I wake up in the middle of the night, first thing in the morning, and now when I listen to any other piano player, they sound like an amateur. So anyway, he uses the chromatic scale a lot too. And you know, in the diminished scale, there's all these little chromatic parts in there. I mean, if you get going on that diminished scale, Just finishing it out with some chromaticism or something like that works good. What I don't like to hear is somebody who improvises with all chromatic stuff. You know, something like that. That doesn't interest me very much, and I do hear that from time to time from like local piano players. And there are some good ones here. I'm in a big city, Atlanta. But anyway, hopefully, you know, this helps give you kind of another way of looking at these three very important scales: the diminished, the altered, and the Lydian dominant, and the root scale. Okay, thanks very much. I want to thank my recent Patreon subscribers: Ted, Carl, the Side Doc, Louis, Augusto, Ira, and George. Thanks a lot for contributing to my channel. I really appreciate it. And be back again with you soon. What do I've got coming up here? Something. Oh yeah, I'm going to teach people how to improvise using the blues. Very important.
I think we're unique because now, as you can see, we are in a studio atmosphere. We're not in a remote atmosphere anymore. But then how do we kind of continue to use StreamYard is pretty much every show we have has a remote guest in. So we bring our remote guests through StreamYards. We have virtual events still with all of our season ticket holders and our VIP clients. All that is going to be produced.
Channel, Jazz Piano College. Going to take a look at the Lydian dominant scale today. And I just showed a few examples of using it in songs that you probably know. So first, for those who don't know what it is, let's do it in the key of C. This is why it's called the Lydian dominant, because the Lydian scale has a raised fourth. However, when we're playing this scale, we're going to think of that more as a flat 5 than a raised fourth, even though the 5 is there too. So technically it's a sharp 4. Especially older musicians, dominant chord with a flat 5 was just such a common way of notating, you know, a hip sounding chord back in the day. I'm going to just think of that as a flat 5. And it also has the flat 7 because it's on a dominant chord, so it needs to have the flat 7. It does not have the flat 9 or the sharp 9, so be careful about that. Okay, now this scale fits perfectly on this chord. C, dominant 7th, with the 9th, sharp 11, 13. And you know that's a D major triad above a C 7th kind of structure. We've left the 5th out to avoid, you know, too much stability in the chord. We want the chord to be somewhat unstable, as all dominant 7ths are. So, for those of you who watched my last video where I went in depth about a scale, it was the altered scale. It is actually the altered scale a tritone away. Like if I played F sharp 7th, and let me do this, you know, with some altered intervals here. Like if we were going right like that. That same scale even though the scales are technically the same, just a tritone apart, you want to study them, thinking about them both ways, as C Lydian dominant or F altered. Okay, and you know, to practice this, of course, you could just take it around the cycle. So G, and then, all right, that's using it on a 2-5-1. All right, used it again. Now, when do you use this scale? The best place to use it, and I was looking at this book again by Scott Reeves, Creative Jazz Improvisation, and he says not to use it, or says it's not really that great when you're actually on the 5 chord, like if I'm in the key of F and I do a G minor. But obviously it works just fine. However, it is stronger if you use it when it's a dominant 2 chord. I guess I'm thinking of like the A train or something like in B flat. Donnelly is the song
I
we're
got
going
a
to cover a
fifty.
little bit more, so let's do that.
Oh,
All right, now here's an F, 7th, and this is the 6th chord, but it works pretty well here too. If the original melody is something like that, then this scale is going to sound a little different on that particular chord. Now, so F Lydian dominant just has this 1 flat in it. All right, but here's the 2 chord, and here's the B flat Lydian dominant scale. Just has these 2 flats. All right, so there you go. Probably come back and do a few more examples. When not to use it. You can use it on any dominant 7th chord, but if the original song, has a melody like, say, Green Dolphin Street, like in the B section, right there.
So how is used? How is used? Is it okay? Я forgotish. Я ж forgotish. По мне так ничего так. Слышно-то хоть нормально, нет? Смотри. Что надо? Что это? Ну нет, наоборот, чтобы все видели, просто что это видите. Буркин. Мурчик, наоборот. Мурчик. Ну нет. Ну вот это он имеет в виду. Думаешь? Ты так думаешь? Шире. Да ты особо не переживай, это скорее всего либо порно-сайта, пара таких каких-нибудь мест залаченных, либо один жирный мужик, который фотки просто там ботит какие-то. 10 аккаунтов наоборот. Это особо наоборот, он тебя понял. Ну да. Думаешь? Ты хочешь сказать, что они там все настоящие, что ли? Ты не смеешься ли там на тебя все говоришь? Да. Ой, да это вот не надо. Нет, просто так. Ну не знаю я, не знаю, что. Может ты настоящий. Да. Вот я все равно времени-то нет ни хрена. Ты понял, да? Ну да. Ну ладно, согласен, в принципе, да. Ну как-то неловко там, но в принципе да, согласен, тоже так. Я даже не думаю сейчас про это. Сейчас я все брошу, буду понимать, да. Как-то как неудобно. Тут-то понятно, ты просто так, а там ты что добавился, блин? Понимаешь? Ну да, ладно. Ну хорошо. Ну да. Ну не надо уж так. Аппликатор Кузнецова, да, нужно. Нет. Че ты? Эй!